Prologue. The air reeked of blood and decay as Detective Harper crept toward the farmhouse, his team flanking him. Inside, the glow of candles illuminated a scene from hell itself. Animal masks, guttural chants, and an altar drenched in crimson. The babysitter from hell. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the neatly manicured lawns of Maplewood Drive. Emily stood at the window, cradling her daughter, Lila, against her chest. The toddler's tiny fingers gripped a strand of her mother's hair as she drifted in and out of sleep. The house, though spacious and filled with potential, still felt foreign, a stranger's home dressed up in their furniture. New job, new neighborhood, new beginnings, Mark had said with his usual optimism. But Emily had yet to be convinced as they had moved halfway across the country for his new position. The company had made lots of promises that would set them up for life, if they came true, that is. They had left behind family and the all-important network of trusted friends. She had only agreed to the move because she had been told by the company that they would be able to offer their 2-year-old daughter, Lila, a much better start in life. The area had great facilities and amenities and was rated as one of the safest areas to raise a family. Mark's voice broke her thoughts. Em, you're going to love it. Trust me. He was standing in the doorway, tie loosened and laptop bag slung over one shoulder. It's just one evening. I'll be with you the whole time and we'll be back by 10, tops. Emily frowned. It's not about the event, Mark. It's leaving her, with a stranger. Not a stranger. Sarah comes highly recommended. Rachel swears by her. Rachel was the wife of one of Mark's colleagues, and a name Emily had heard repeatedly since the move. Rachel this, Rachel that. Her glowing endorsement of Sarah, a professional babysitter with an impeccable record, had done little to soothe Emily's nerves. Still, she relented. Mark had worked hard for this promotion, and the corporate event was important. Fine, but I want to meet her first. No shortcuts and no promises. The night of the event arrived faster than Emily had anticipated. She paced the living room, glancing at the clock as Lila cooed from her playmat. A sharp knock on the door sent a jolt through her. Mark opened the door, revealing Sarah. She was everything Emily hoped for in a sitter, punctual, polished, and exuding warmth. Dressed in a crisp blouse and carrying a professional-looking tote, the woman stepped inside with a practiced smile. You must be Emily, and this little one must be Lila. Sarah crouched to Lila's level, her voice honey-sweet. Lila, much to Emily's surprise, giggled and reached for her. Emily's tension began to ease. Thank you for coming. I left a list of emergency contacts on the fridge, along with instructions for her bedtime routine. If there's anything, I've got it covered. Sarah interrupted gently, her gaze never leaving Lila. You two go enjoy yourselves. She's in good hands. As they prepared to leave, Emily lingered, her motherly instincts warring with her need to support Mark. Call us if you need anything, she said for the third time. I will, Sarah replied, her tone patient. You deserve a night out. Mark placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder, guiding her toward the door. Let's go, Em. She's got this. Sarah watched them leave, the warm smile never wavering. As the door clicked shut, her expression shifted. Her eyes darkened, and she turned to Lila, who was babbling happily on her playmat. Such a precious little thing, she murmured, kneeling down. Her voice, now tinged with something unsettling, barely rose above a whisper. Don't worry, sweetheart. We're going on a little adventure. At the banquet hall, Emily and Mark immersed themselves in the evening's festivities. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, a stark contrast to Emily's usual quiet evenings at home. For the first time in many months, she felt a sliver of normalcy return. The hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses filled the elegant ballroom where the corporate event was underway. Mark and Emily sat at a round table adorned with crisp white linens and a centerpiece of glowing candles. For the first time in months, Emily felt herself relax. This is nice, Mark said, leaning in close. He reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. You look beautiful tonight. Emily smiled, a faint blush creeping up her cheeks. It's nice to dress up for a change. The couple sipped wine, laughed at Mark's colleagues' anecdotes, and even found themselves dancing under the twinkling chandeliers. For a brief moment, the weight of parenthood and the stress of their recent move melted away. Mark's arm draped protectively around her waist as he introduced her to his colleagues. She laughed politely at jokes and nibbled at hors d'oeuvres, her initial anxiety slowly ebbing. A colleague's wife leaned in, whispering, "Sarah is a gem. We've used her for years. You're lucky to have found her." Emily smiled, feeling a surge of relief. Maybe tonight wasn't such a bad idea after all. "She's wonderful with Lila," she replied, glancing at her phone out of habit. No missed calls or messages, everything seemed fine. "You know," Mark said as they swayed to a slow tune, "we should do this more often. Now that we've found someone like Sarah, maybe we can take a little time for ourselves now and then." Emily glanced at him non-committally. "What do you think? Maybe we should do this more often?" he repeated gently. Emily hesitated but found herself nodding. "Yeah, maybe." By 10 o'clock they were back in the car, the quiet hum of the engine filling the space between them. Mark glanced at Emily. "See, everything worked out fine. Lila's probably fast asleep, and Sarah's got everything under control." Emily offered a small smile. "You were right, it was a lovely evening and your colleagues are so friendly. But I can't help but feel guilty at abandoning Lila." Mark placed a hand on her leg, squeezing it gently in a reassuring way. "We didn't abandon her, you silly sausage." Taking her hand, he kissed it gently. "I love you." The drive home was filled with quiet contentment. Mark hummed along to the radio while Emily rested her head against the window, letting the gentle hum of the car soothe her. They pulled into the driveway at 10:15 p.m. earlier than planned. The house stood in darkness. Mark frowned. "That's odd. She said she'd leave the porch light on." Emily's heart began to race as they stepped out of the car. The stillness of the night felt oppressive, the shadows deeper than they should have been. Mark unlocked the front door, stepping inside with a cheerful, "We're back." They were met by an unsettling silence. "Sarah?" She hurried toward the living room, finding it empty. Lila's playmat was undisturbed, her favourite stuffed bunny abandoned on the floor. The silence that greeted them was immediate and unnerving. Emily's heart began to race as she called out, her voice trembling, "Sarah? Lila?" Mark checked the kitchen and the back rooms, his movements growing more frantic. "She's not here," he said, his voice tight with panic. Emily sprinted up the stairs, her pulse pounding in her ears. She pushed open Lila's bedroom door and froze. The crib was empty. The walls were scrawled with strange, jagged symbols that looked like they had been painted in a dark, viscous substance that looked horrifyingly like blood. A metallic smell hung heavy in the air. "Mark!" she screamed. He stood right behind her, his face pale. "What the hell is this?" Emily collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Her trembling fingers dialed 911. Mark wrapped his arms around her, his own tears falling freely. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. Mark tried to piece together what had happened. The operator's calm voice only served to underscore the chaos in their home. "Please," Emily begged, "our baby, she's gone. She's taken our baby." The police arrived within minutes, although it felt like an eternity. Their presence a flurry of activity and clipped commands. Officers combed through the house, photographing the symbols and searching for any trace of Lila or Sarah. Detective Harper, a stoic man with a weary expression, pulled Emily aside. "Mrs. Carter, we'll do everything we can to find your daughter. Do you recognize these symbols?" Emily shook her head, her voice barely audible. "No, I've never seen anything like them. They appear ritualistic," Harper said grimly. He motioned to a forensic technician, who began photographing the symbols meticulously. "We're analysing them further to see if they match anything on record. Lab tests are being expedited to confirm if the blood is human, and if so, whether it belongs to Lila. We'll also need something with her DNA, a hairbrush or similar, to rule that out definitively." Emily's stomach twisted. What does that mean?" Harper's tone was steady. "It means we may be dealing with someone who has done this before. Patterns leave trails. We'll follow every lead." Mark clenched his fists, his voice barely above a whisper. "We trusted her. How could we be so blind, so stupid?" Emily didn't respond. Her thoughts spiraled, filled with images of Lila's laugh, her tiny hands, and the stranger who had stolen her away. As the investigators packed up, and the house fell into an oppressive silence. Harper looked back at the distraught parents. "We'll do everything we can. Don't lose hope. Liaison Officer Murray will be downstairs should you remember anything else that may help us." The morning light seeped through the curtains, cruel in its indifference. The once cozy home now felt like a crime scene, a space occupied by grief, confusion, and the faint echoes of Lila's laughter. Detective Harper, still determined to crack the case, arrived at their door with news. "We've received a lead," he said, stepping into the house. His eyes were bloodshot, his face lined with exhaustion. A local farmer reported seeing a woman matching Sarah's description with a small group of others at a gas station near the state line. He thinks she was with a child. Emily shot up from the couch. "A child? Was it Lila? Is she okay?" Harper raised a hand to temper her rising hope. The witness couldn't confirm. The child was wrapped in a blanket and it was dark, but we're pulling surveillance footage from the area and coordinating with law enforcement in the neighbouring state. Mark clenched his fists. "This is the first real lead we've had in weeks. What's being done to act on it?" Harper nodded. "Roadblocks have been set up along major routes, and officers are checking every motel, rest stop, and diner within a 100-mile radius. If she's still in the area, we'll find her." Hours later, Harper called with an update. The surveillance footage from the gas station had come through. It showed a woman walking briskly to a rusted van. A small figure, likely a child, was draped over her shoulder. The timestamp showed it was recorded a few hours earlier. "We've traced the van to an abandoned property about 70 miles out," Harper informed the Carters. "It's risky, but we're mounting a raid. I wanted you to know we're acting on it." Emily grabbed Mark's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Can we come?" Harper shook his head. "It's too dangerous. Please trust us." Mark exhaled sharply, his frustration palpable, but he nodded. "Bring her home," he said, his voice breaking. The farmhouse stood silent, its decrepit facade bathed in the pale glow of the moon. Inside, shadows danced erratically across the grimy walls, cast by the flickering light of a dozen candles. Detective Harper crouched low by the shattered window, peering into the hellish scene before him. A small group of figures encircled an ancient wooden table, dressed in tattered robes adorned with occult symbols. Animal masks obscured their faces, wolves, goats, and crows, while their lips moved in guttural chants. The sickly sweet stench of rot and blood wafted from the house, crawling into Harper's nostrils and threatening to choke him. He turned to his team, his voice low and steady despite the horror before him. "We go in fast, non-lethal if possible, but do not hesitate if they resist." Harper's tone left no room for doubt. The officers nodded, their faces set. Even the rookie, Officer Daniels, managed a shaky but resolute exhale. Harper gave the signal, and his team stormed the farmhouse, kicking in the door with a deafening crash. "Police, get on the ground!" Harper bellowed as they flooded the room, weapons drawn. The chanting stopped abruptly, replaced by chaos. One cultist lunged at Officer Daniels with a rusted blade and was shot in the leg before being restrained. Another threw a candle, igniting a curtain, but was quickly tackled to the ground. Harper fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the report echoing through the room. "Down! Now!" Most of the group dropped to their knees, hands raised, but a few resisted. Harper sidestepped a charging cultist wielding a crude club and delivered a precise blow with the butt of his pistol, sending the man crumpling to the floor. When the chaos subsided, the cultists were restrained, their masks ripped away to reveal gaunt, fanatical faces. Harper ordered his team to secure the scene and search the house for any other victims or accomplices. It wasn't until the room was cleared that the officers turned their full attention to the table. Harper approached slowly, his pulse pounding in his ears. The blood-stained fabric draped over the table was bad enough, but nothing prepared him for what lay atop it. Officer Morales was the first to break the silence, crossing himself as tears streamed down his face. "She's just a kid," he choked out. Harper forced himself to look. Lila's small frame was laid out before them, her wrists and ankles grotesquely nailed to the wood. Her chest was a gaping wound, her insides desecrated. Harper felt his stomach churn as he realized the truth. This was no mere ritual. It was a feast. Daniel staggered backward, clutching his stomach before vomiting in the corner. "Oh, God. Jesus Christ," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Get forensics in here," Harper barked, his voice hoarse. "Document everything." He turned to his team, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "Every last piece." As the officers secured the room and waited for backup, the cultists began to laugh. A low, eerie chuckle that swelled into a cacophony of unhinged mirth. Harper grabbed the nearest one, slamming him against the wall. "Why?" he demanded, his voice a snarl. "Why her?" The man's grin was wide, his teeth stained with blood. "She was pure," he rasped. "A vessel for the old gods. You're too late, detective. The offering is made." Harper's fury boiled over. With a guttural roar, he smashed the butt of his gun into the cultist's face. The sickening crunch of bone echoed through the room as the man's nose shattered, blood spurting across the wall. The cultist crumpled to the floor, moaning weakly as crimson pooled beneath him. The room fell silent, save for the laboured breathing of the officers. No one moved to intervene. No one said a word. Harper's team, pale and shaken, turned a blind eye to his outburst. They had all seen too much tonight to judge. Harper stood over the broken man, his chest heaving. He wiped the blood from his knuckles onto his pants, forcing himself to look away before his anger consumed him entirely. "Harper," Morales said softly, breaking the tension. "We need to focus." With a sharp exhale, Harper stepped back. "Secure the scene," he barked, his voice tight but controlled. The cultists were transported to the precinct under heavy guard, but their deranged laughter lingered in the air, echoing in the minds of everyone present. By dawn, the farmhouse was a crime scene swarming with forensic teams. Emily and Mark Carter were inconsolable when Harper delivered the news. Mark punched the wall, breaking his hand, while Emily collapsed to the floor, screaming Lila's name. Harper stayed with them as long as he could, offering what little comfort he could muster. That night, as he sat in his car staring blankly at the dashboard, the image of Lila's broken body refused to leave his mind. The case would haunt him forever, a grim reminder of the darkness lurking in humanity's shadows.